All right, welcome, guys. I want to start off with this because I think it's funny how many people like to come on the channel and just spew ignorance, or sometimes they just want to come on and shout out, "You're fear-mongering, you're this, you're that." Okay, but look, facts don't lie, and here are the facts. Heat is the number one killer, because I took some heat on that a little bit yesterday, no pun intended. It's the number one killer when it comes to weather-related fatalities. Last year, for the last 10 years, and for the last 30 years. Above everything else, far above it, more than double any single type of disaster. We're talking about flooding, tornadoes, hurricanes, winter, cold, wind, by far. And we're going to get some really strong heat this week in the east, triple-digit heat. We could also see some potential tropical development. And that's another thing we're going to look at too. And we've got the storms, not just tonight, but also into tomorrow. Let's start here. We'll talk about the storms that are going here across the northern plains, also into parts of Colorado. As far east as Pittsburgh, we've seen some storms in and around that area. That will continue through the evening hours. We'll also start to see the risk of some tornadoes go down, but through the evening hours, I think you got to watch this area. Also, we've got some hail possible, and some of that could be really large, especially across parts of Nebraska, Kansas, even as far east as Wisconsin up toward Lake Michigan. So some big storms moving through this area. Tomorrow, the risk pushes here. So now we're looking at areas east of that over toward Minnesota, dragging south into parts of Kansas and Nebraska. Once again, as our front moves east, the best tornado risk will be here. That's where you're going to have your most wind shear, your change of wind direction with height. Let's take a look at some of these storms on the future radar. Through the overnight hours, let's back it up just a little bit, because through the evening, some of these storms, again, could be pretty strong here across parts of Wisconsin, Minnesota, back through the Dakotas. And I would say even in this corridor, while it's not a huge threat, there will be some storms going here. They'll back off once we move into the overnight hours. And then we're looking at some decent rain showers, too, starting to push into parts of the south here as onshore flow develops like this. Heading into Tuesday, though, once we get into the afternoon, we'll see these storms fire right along this line of this front that's moving east. And it's going to also bring some heavy rain, too. And look at this line that starts to develop as we head into the afternoon and evening hours. We could have a decent squall line setting up. And here comes our tropical moisture into Texas. We've been talking about that as we see the potential for some tropical development here in the Gulf of Mexico with a lot of warm water. And we're going to look at that in just a moment. Let's continue this radar tour. A lot of rain right now falling into parts of the Appalachians. Not everybody's seeing it. Some of these areas could really use some rain, especially into the Carolinas. Unfortunately, these are hit or miss showers. Not everyone's seeing them. There's a severe weather moving through parts of New York and Pennsylvania. That will weaken overnight, and then we'll see things really calm down. Notice this onshore flow right in here. I'm going to show you this really quick because over the next several days, that's one of the keys that I think right in the here, we won't be as hot as we will be further north. In fact, that's where the heat is going to be concentrated just because of that onshore flow. Also, our height lines or our heights, our atmosphere is going to be thicker a little bit further to the north. All right, let's look at the rain, though, as we head into Tuesday evening. Some of these storms up into Michigan could get strong. The biggest storms will be back to the west. Quite a bit of shower activity, though, moving up and down the Mississippi River here as we head into Tuesday night and then into Wednesday. Some of that tries to move toward the Great Lakes. That may give you some cloud cover, but this big dome of high pressure in the upper levels is going to just dominate the weather for the next several days. In fact, it's going to be pretty tall. I would say pushing record temperatures into some of these areas, triple-digit heat, maybe all-time June highs for some of these places. So this is not a normal thing to see temperatures this warm in some of these areas. Now, not everyone's going to see the heat, but this is definitely one heck of a ridge that starts to shift further to the west. Now going this way, right? Setting up here across the central part of the country. We may see some relief here in the northeast by the weekend. Not a lot as this moves east, but that actually may bring some severe weather. Something to keep an eye on toward the end of the weekend that's coming up. There's that onshore flow again, keeping parts of the mid-Atlantic maybe not as hot as we would be, although we're talking about 90s still on Tuesday for high temperatures. But if we didn't have that onshore flow here into the coastal areas of the Carolinas and Virginia, we could be in the triple digits easily, which I think we will later in the week. A lot of 90s out there, pretty much south of this line, even into Canada. We're talking about 90s. I'm not sure how that equates into Celsius, but you get what I'm saying. It's going to be hot. There's that core of hot air. I almost said hot water. That hot air setting up right here across the Ohio Valley into the Northeast. Another day of 90s. We're talking about mid-90s too, possibly here into southern New England for Wednesday. And then as we move into Thursday, another hot day across the same areas. So multiple days of heat. And then look at these numbers starting to show up on Friday. Maybe some triple-digit heat. Starting to heat up here, too, across the south. Getting close to 100 across Mississippi, Alabama, all the way up to St. Louis. Are we looking at triple-digit heat for the weekend? And again, maybe close to the nation's capital. I think it's on the table with some very hot times ahead. Another hot day across the plain states, too. Some cooler air, though, trying to work in here. But there's all that heat, that big heat dome here, actually trying to move further west. So this is Friday. So now we've got upper 90s pushing into Oklahoma and parts of Kansas. Triple-digit heat now into Oklahoma City. And that heat continues to push all the way to the face of the Rockies as we move toward the weekend. So a big warm-up on the way. Quick look at the tropics. That's what we're looking at here, right across the Bay of Campeche. Those thunderstorms blowing up here as that area of low pressure moves through. The National Hurricane Center saying, look, this is definitely an area to watch as this disturbance now, moving through the Bay of Campeche, is creating a broad area of winds, 35 to 40 miles per hour, regardless of where this thing goes. It's going to bring life-threatening flooding to parts of Mexico and even parts of Central America where it's been just pouring rain here. And development is looking more and more likely. This is what I think is interesting to look at off of the East Coast, back in here, that potentially could move toward somewhere in the southeast. All right, so we're still several days out on that, but that is something that's getting watched. So let's kind of put things into motion. There's our big Bermuda high here, bringing in that easterly flow here, then turning southerly, pulling in a lot of Gulf moisture, keeping things hot. And then we look to that system here moving into Mexico. It looks like that's where it's going, but a lot of rain into Texas. And then there's our next storm as we head into the weekend, moving through the Great Lakes. It could bring some severe weather to parts of Michigan, down to Illinois, potentially as far south as Missouri. But most of that energy moves into Canada. And then I think we have to watch right in here, off the southeast coast. If something developed, the European model not picking up on it very much at this point, but I think it's worth watching. In fact, the European tries to bring another tropical system up toward Louisiana or so by the end of that run there, heading into the following week. So very active weather ahead, guys. If you like this stuff, if you enjoy this kind of weather content, I hope you'll subscribe. We've also got some cold weather, too, to talk about. We kind of just jumped through that. We talked about the heat. Look at the snow going here tonight into tomorrow across parts of the northern Rockies. So, if you want to escape the heat, head to the high country into Montana and also even into parts of Idaho and then up into Alberta and British Columbia. Cold. I'm sure it's a very chilly time up towards Banff, up in Alberta. All right. Thanks for watching, guys. I'll catch you next time.